So for the past couple months, I've been watching FX's Alien Earth, the very first television adaptation in the long-running and very tired Alien franchise. A franchise that, in spite of how meh most of it is, I still do care about, and I'm happy to report that this show is pretty good. In fact, it's kind of shockingly good, not quite on the level of shockingly good as Andor was, but it's right there just a few ticks down, and that is far more than I expected. I mean, when I heard about this show, I was like, okay, that could be fine, I guess, maybe it won't suck. Who knows? It's not that I didn't think the franchise could ever be that good or that Noah Hawley and crew weren't up to the task, but it's just safe to assume most franchises like this are just not going to produce good stuff more often than not. It of course happens here and there, but most franchise media these days is pretty subpar to say the least. This show though, this really blew me away. First of all, as it says in the name, it takes place on Earth, which if you're familiar with the Alien franchise, is not a place we've ever really been to. I mean, technically the series has had a scene or two on Earth or been on a space station or a spaceship right next to it, and I guess if you include the AVP stuff, there's been 2 whole movies there, but as far as mainline Alien films go, Earth is mostly an unknown entity. We know it's of course our same Earth, just in the not so distant to very distant future that's highly advanced, fully in the age of space exploration, and most importantly, heavily implied to be ruled not by nation states, but by corporations. Being that none of the movies take place on Earth or require lore dumps to make the stories work, the info you get about Earth is very sparse, and up to the release of the show, that has, at least in my opinion, been a great quality of the Alien series. We're very used to these days having just insane, limitless amounts of lore and wiki pages for all the major franchises out there in any medium, and that's not a bad thing, mind you, but what it can do is rob a lot of these great stories of their mystery and intrigue and just make things seem, you know, less interesting. I mean, Star Wars is like the worst example of this. The amount of terrible, meaningless, stupid lore on fucking Wikipedia makes that franchise feel so limited and very often hard to take seriously. When you get to a point in a franchise where people are legitimately getting mad about Ki-Adi-Mundi's birthday, we have officially lost the plot as fans. Sometimes too much lore is a bad thing, and that's a thing that Alien has never had to deal with in a major way. Yes, there's plenty of established lore and wiki pages, but not like on a ridiculous Star Wars kind of level. Each new voice can come in and for the most part craft the story they want to tell with no restrictions and very little expectations from fans aside from basic xenomorph action. So, Alien not having this mountain of lore and established things that must be true is just such a massive benefit for the long-term viability of it as a franchise. And Earth is just such a perfect example of that. The fact that we know so little about it and never hear much about what goes on there makes it seem, well, alien. By simply not setting any of its stories there, the franchise is telling us that it's not a place people want to be. You only hear about it in reference to the corporations that rule it, but the working class is out there in the stars, colonizing other systems and trying to find new homes and hope elsewhere. There is no hope on Earth, and we know that despite any real time devoted to fleshing it out. Similar to the xenomorph itself, by not seeing it as much, it becomes that much more terrifying. It perfectly illustrates the themes of the franchise by being this unexplored, mostly irrelevant cog in the machine. All this to say, the idea of actually setting an entire story in Alien on Earth did give me some amount of pause, because once you break that dam of mystery, it is impossible to put that shit back together, so if you do it, it better be fucking good. And thankfully, it is. We get full lore on the status quo on Earth, what corporations have the most power, how they settle disputes amongst themselves, how they've brainwashed much of the population into believing their rule is just. We get a whole lot, but not too much. It's this really great balance where there is still plenty of mystery to uncover, and more importantly, room for your mind to wonder. It's great. It also fits perfectly with the movies and doesn't feel like a different setting than the one we're used to. So on that front, this show gets an A++. What really sells it though is the story itself, which for the majority of of this show's runtime is simply masterful. It's not about a bunch of people in a location doing some science mumbo jumbo until one of them gets face huggered and an alien goes on a rampage. Well, I guess now that I think about it, that does actually happen, but boy did they dress that up in a nice outfit, because while the core alien loop is still maintained in this show, what it's really about is humanity. It's some good old-fashioned classic sci-fi Blade Runner type shit. It's awesome. So, one of the major corporations that rule Earth is a company called Prodigy, which is run by this very young genius named Boy Cavalier, who has developed the technology to transfer human consciousness into a synth body. A breakthrough that his company decides to test on children dying of cancer. And as we see in the very first episode, it works. The children are all successfully transferred into adult bodies with enhanced physical and mental abilities, and the majority of the show is simply us hanging out with them and seeing how they cope with their new lives and how those around them define their humanity. At its core, that is what the show is most interested in. In the age of technology where there are cyborgs and androids and human synth hybrids and also just regular humans still running around, what is humanity and what is life and who gets to define it? Like, are the children still the same children? I mean, they think they are, but if you copy and paste something into a new form and discard the original, what does that make this new entity? Is it the same? Does it simply think it's the same? Is it neither? Is it actually capable of original thought and the human experience? We see the children deal with this the whole show, as does the brother of the main character, who constantly grapples with if he should mourn his sister or if she is still very much alive in this new body. The company and Boy Cavalier don't view them as humans at all and expressly see them as property, and yet they are presumably exactly what they want to turn themselves into one day. So what does that say about them if they seek to take the human elements out of humanity? And at that point, what's the point of humanity if everyone is an immortal robot that can have their emotions physically dialed down and their memories wiped? There's just endless questions the show has you thinking about, not the least of which is the idea of what a monster really is. The company is in possession of all kinds of different alien species and view them as nothing more than lab experiments, and yet they discover that these creatures are highly intelligent and capable of complex thought. Despite that, though, the humans pay no mind to the idea of mercy or that these creatures aren't their property, inflicting more pain and suffering on them than the aliens do the entire show. None of these questions are unique to Alien Earth. This is all classic sci-fi stuff, but the show's long commitment to these ideas being the meat of the show is what makes it so good at its best. There's so many layers and so much subtext baked into it, the likes of which this franchise has never seen, but it doesn't have its head so far up its ass that it strays away from what makes the Alien franchise the Alien franchise. Even at its slowest and most thoughtful, none of this is boring. I mean, the creature design for the new aliens is just amazing. They're not all used as much as they perhaps should have been, but like that eye creature, for example, is just so fucking brilliant. This sentient eye that burrows its way into a creature's eye socket and is able to puppeteer it is just so goddamn terrifying. I did not expect this franchise to ever produce anything as remotely interesting as the classic Xenomorph, but that eye is proof that anything is possible. That thing is an absolute stroke of genius. On a very technical level too, the show is like stupidly well directed, kind of like Alien Romulus, where you're just taken aback by how good everything looks and how incredible the shot composition is. I mean, they managed to fade in clips of fucking Ice Age into this show that you will think are super tight and take seriously. I mean, the balls of these people cannot be understated. The thought to even do that is just nuts. But it all works. And episode 5 of the show, which is a classic self-contained alien spaceship story, is legit better than most of the Alien movies. It is an hour-long masterclass in suspenseful horror television. There's just so much praise to go around, and I think the very best part of the show, beyond everything I've already talked about, is the acting. The performances in this show will carry you through it no matter what your thoughts are on anything else. The big standout to me, and forgive me if I totally butcher this name, but Babu Sise as the cyborg Morrow is just incredible in this. The way he plays a cyborg as this very intimidating presence that knows how strong and capable he is and is so focused on his mission, but also carries with him this level of indifference is just so compelling. Similar to the androids like Kirsch, he is able to execute his plans with this cold, ruthless efficiency, but unlike the androids, Morrow has that quality not due to any kind of programming, but due to his cynicism and jaded nature. He's just had the humanity sucked out of him and given over to this corporation. Timothy Oliphant as Kirsch is likewise a great sassy-ass android with a weird edge to him. Samuel Blenking gives perhaps the most convincing performance in the show as the modern tech CEO that views himself as this superior being and has no respect for anything or anyone around him, wearing his stupid-ass clothes and kicking his feet up at important meetings, just being the most arrogant little shit alive. It's been a while since I've watched a show and wanted a character to bite it this bad, so I gotta give it to this guy for making me feel that way. All the actors that play the Lost Boys are amazing too. They have the hardest jobs in the show by far, where they have to come off like kids and also mature as the story goes on and become this weird mix of both kids and adults. It's this really tough balance, but they all nail it and never feel goofy or silly. They're all just legit kids in the bodies of adults. Everyone in the cast just sells their roles so hard and helps elevate a few of the weaker elements of the show. I cannot say enough good things about them. So by and large, Alien Earth is one of the very best shows of the year and one of the very best franchise products I've seen in a long time. But unfortunately, what makes it fall a bit flat and what for me is probably going to bother me for a long time is how this show ends. You see, as I was watching it, I was under the impression, based on the way the story was unfolding and also the Noah Hawley Fargo connection, that this was going to be a mostly self-contained season of TV. Sure, it could have a few lingering plot threads and maybe some options for future seasons. I didn't need everyone to just blow up in the end, but I expected the core plot of this show to be at least somewhat resolved by the end, which it wasn't. And not just the main plot, mind you, but pretty much every single plot thread in this show. Pretty much nothing is resolved or leads to a satisfying conclusion by the end of episode 8. Instead, it opts to cliffhanger everything for a second season and beyond. Now, yes, I am aware that this is a TV show and shows tend to lead into more seasons of TV shows, as is their nature. People are saying that shows often run more than one season, and I get that, and I'm not even against this show doing that in some form like Fargo, but this is just not it, man. It felt like the show was setting all of these pieces up, like the Eye Alien and Yutani and Morrow invading the island and the kids rebelling and eventually leaving and just all this stuff, and it was built up for the most part really well, and then you watch the last episode and nothing really happens to resolve any of it. It's not just setting up a potential second season, which of course would be fine. It is requiring a second season to get any semblance of a conclusion out of it, which I just cannot get behind. Not just for the fact that shows these days tend to take years to come out, but also because apparently a second season of this show is not even guaranteed. It's not like these other franchise shows that have these long runways to work with. This was it, and while it's been received overall very well, it's not like it was out here blowing up the records on Hulu, so now it's all up in the air, and it's entirely possible that this might never get resolved, or might take like 3+ years to do so. Either way, it's just not very satisfying, and I can't pretend that it worked when it just didn't. It doesn't matter how good most of the show was if it ends up going nowhere. There's something to be said about understanding how much you can stretch out a story, and one great season, I think, was the right number for this particular show. I'd be happy to be wrong, but I feel like this might end up being one of those many squandered shows people talk about in the years to come. Even still though, it's one of the better things to ever come out of the Alien franchise, and if it had a good ending, it'd be right up there in the Hall of Fame with the first 2 movies, so, you know, it isn't like a disaster or anything, just a bit of a letdown. If you're a fan of Alien like I am though, it's certainly worth a watch, and hey, maybe we can all just cross our fingers and pray that this story will get finished at some point. Here's hoping.